Sheesh! Who knew animating was so dangerous? But dangerous can be exciting. Enough talking already, let's do this!
Let's animate! Yay!
In today's lesson, we're going to talk about physics and bone dynamics. Now, one of the great things about Moho is that it has an engine for bone dynamics, which allows you to add a lot of complex animation to your rig without a lot of work on your part. You can add overlapping or secondary animation without having to do all the heavy work of animating each section by keyframes. So let's go take a look at Froderick. So when I first started using Moho, I wasn't really creating my characters with the idea of bone dynamics in mind. So I created Froderick, and because he's a frog, he doesn't really have hair or anything, or scars or anything that can flap in the wind. But I went back later and I created this sort of like section where I could take his tie out of his suit. And so when I'm animating his run, he has, and you can't see it here, but let's see what bone that would probably, yeah. So if you look, I have these 3 bones set up on his tie so that when he's running, it kind of does this little flappy thing in the wind. And all I had to do was create those 3 bones, bind them, and then go in and set up my bone dynamics. And how you take a look at that is you press B, select the bone, make sure you're on frame 0, and go to bone constraints. And see at the bottom I have bone dynamics turned on, and I have my angle set. So I have torque at 0.5, spring at 0.5, damping at 1, and weight at 0.5. So these are very conservative numbers. They're very subtle. You're getting a very subtle animation with his run. And it's not moving much, but it's enough to actually give it a little bit of fun, a little bit of overlapping animation that would have actually taken a lot of work to do by hand. But here, all I had to do was turn on a couple of settings. Here I have 2 bones that I've set up, and I've just added some keyframes to them. And right now it's just doing this, and it's very boring. But if we go and select both these bones, we go up to bone dynamics and we turn them on. We turn on angle, just setting the default, you get this smooth animation. Now, if we go up and we change this to something like 4, you're gonna get a lot more movement on the bone because it has a lot more weight. And it takes longer to settle. If we go back and now we add more torque, you're gonna get a lot more motion to it, and it's still gonna take that same amount of time to slow down. If we go and say add a lot more spring, this could get a little bit chaotic. So it's moving faster. So torque gives it more movement. Spring speeds it up, and the weight basically says how long it's going to take to settle. So play around with these settings. If we go to damping, you're going to get, it's just going to put a little bit of pause, a little bit of stoppage on all of those settings. And you'll find what settings work well for what you're working on. If we take a look at this animation, I don't actually have a lot of keyframes. So this is not my design. I found this and I was like, this needs to be animated. I think I took a good while on a weekend to actually do the vector because he's got a lot of texture on all these things. But then the actual animation I think took like less than half an hour. And if we look at these red bones, they have bone dynamics set up. And you're getting this sort of like little extra. I was never really happy with the toilet paper, probably because at this time it was not, so for this, what am I on? I'd probably now give this way more weight. There, let's see see already, you can see that's better. Little too much. Let's give that weight 1. Okay. So a lot of this is literally just playing around until you get settings you like. But it adds, like, and I'm really happy actually with the hair because it gives this like bounce. And when you're looking at the bones, but like you could spend a lot of time doing all this by hand. And I did a lot more of it by hand than I probably needed to. I probably could have done the tie and the glasses and a couple of other things with dynamics as well. But I was really happy with just how this turned out. All right, so here we have an example of bone delay. So if we take a look at Spot's tail, I've got it set up to have a delay. So this tail 4 is controlling this one, and it's got a 3-frame delay, which means when he's walking, you've got this sort of like coming off. It moves later. It takes a moment to catch up by 3 frames. So that's also something that you can play with and add some extra motion to your animations. This is an example that shows when using bone dynamics and delays with cycles. You can run into some issues of the animation not finishing before the end of your cycle. I come up against this a lot when I use bone dynamics for hair and I want to create a walk cycle for that character. And so far my fix has been to either lengthen the cycle or it ends up being a good enough moment. And you can see that in this tail because it has a little bit of a right there. It just sort of goes to a position it shouldn't because of the fact that it's not done animating that dynamic, that delay. All right, let's go over physics. Physics is another way that you can add complexity to your animations. Now, one of the ways that I've used it recently is to the intro to my Switch layer, Fred intro. And I had these little cans sort of pop in and fall. And originally when I started working on it, I realized you can't use images with the physics engine in Moho. You can only use vector layers. But I found this great tutorial by Victor Perez about how to get around that limitation. How he explains it is you need to create a vector layer and you basically create a shape around the ping object that you're going to create. So if we zoom in, you'll see I have this clear sort of vector image around this can. And you want to keep it pretty close because it's going to calculate the edge of that. And you want it as close as possible. The way to do this, to set it up, is to use an effect with a texture image. And if we go into can, you'll see I have my image texture here. So I set up a color. It really doesn't matter what color you use. Set up image texture in the drop down and then clicked on this button and I selected from my files the layer that I wanted to use. And you also want to pick through transparency so that you don't see the vector color behind, and that's why it doesn't matter what color you use, and you click OK. And now I have this texture, and if you click on the select object tool, you get like your gradients, you're going to get this little 2-part thing. And the top one is going to give you the control for the size, and the bottom one is going to give you the control for the position. And so you're just going to position it as close to the edge as possible. And that's how you set up all your images. So I set up one and then I just duplicated them, set them up how I wanted, and then you put them in a layer, and then you can turn on physics by double clicking on your layer settings and going to your physics panel and enabling it. And when you play, zoom out and I play, you're gonna see that I get this little animation of the cans falling. And right now it doesn't look like they're falling on anything, but I do have a floor. You can see it right here, this little shape. And the way to do this, if you want it to be invisible, you can't have it clicked off and you can't have the layer invisible or the physics engine won't recognize it. What you have to do is go up to select your layer and make sure that the fill opacity is turned down to 0. And so the physics engine will still see it, but it won't show up in your render. So that is a easy workaround. And now I have these other layers, which are basically just on each side of these. And if I go back to the frame 1 and I play, you're gonna see that it constrains it. So let's go to a new layer. Let's create a new layer and let's start from scratch. So how you would go about this, we've got a vector layer. So I'm actually gonna import my can so that I can see what it's supposed to look like. Okay, and that's really big. So we're gonna make that much smaller. And now I'm just gonna select my vector layer, hit A, make sure I have fill selected, and just create a really tight thing around the edge. Okay, now I'm gonna create a new style. I'm gonna call this can. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna select image texture. I'm gonna go to where my image texture is. I'm gonna click on through transparency and then click OK. Now you can't see anything because this particular vector does not have this style set to it. So I'm gonna hit Q, select it, go to our styles, select can, and there we have it. So now we're going to lower the style. See, there's a caveat. Does not like, there we go. There, yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty close. All right, so now what we can do is we can duplicate this a bunch of times, move it around. Oh, I got both of them selected. All right, now we're gonna make a floor. We're gonna create, there we go. We're gonna go here and we're gonna take the opacity down to nothing. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna group all of these into a group, double click on it and go into physics and enable physics and press OK. And now if you press play, okay, I forgot a step. All right, so what we're gonna do, how we fix this is we go to our floor layer, go to physics, and now that we have physics enabled, each one of these layers is gonna have this added extra ability to change all these settings. So we're gonna go and we're gonna click non-moving object. We're gonna hit apply and we go back to the start and we press play, everything's gonna work. And you can go in and play around with each of these settings. So you can make it so that it starts asleep and it only wakes when something hits it. It can pivot from origin. You can give it more density, more friction, more springiness. The other thing to take note is these keyframes. So once you've created physics, you can't change the objects. Like you can't animate the floor to move or the cans to move. They're gonna move with the keyframes that they have. And you can't change or move them unless you change the dynamics. So that is a fun way to add dynamics. And you can have like a lot of fun with this. You can add different floors. So you can add obstacles to it. And when you change them, the physics will, and the keyframes will update accordingly. And that is the gist of the physics engine and bone dynamics in Moho. You can have a lot of fun with these systems, and I haven't had a lot of opportunity to use the physics engine, so I was really excited when I got to try it out with my falling cans. If you've used physics or bone dynamics in your rig, share a link below. I'd love to see how people are using these features. And if you're enjoying these tutorials, here are some other ones you might find useful.
And don't forget to subscribe, mostly because it tells YouTube you like us.